Let's say we have an application which allows people to create a user account and upload an avatar graphic for themselves. Now, so here I have a pretty large file, 640 by 480 image, and I want to upload it. And notice when I upload it, it scales it down to a nice 100 by 100 size image, and it crops it as well. So this is all done using Paperclip, and it's pretty easy to do. But what if I want to give the user actual control over how the cropping is handled on our avatar graphic file? Well, that'll take a little bit of JavaScript, but I want to show you how to do it in this episode. So if you aren't familiar with file attachments and uploading images using Paperclip, I encourage you to check out episode number 134, where I go into detail and walk you through creating file attachments. It's not too difficult, and this episode will basically build off of what I showed you in that one. There are a number of nice cropping JavaScript libraries out there. The one I'll be using here is called jcrop, and it's a jQuery plugin, and it's a really nice solution and probably one of the most popular for jQuery. Now, if you're using Prototype and Scriptaculous instead of jQuery in your application, you might want to check out the JavaScript Image Cropper UI library for that, and I'll link to this in the show notes as well. Now let's dive into the actual application. Now, as I showed you earlier, we do already have some basic file attachment set up using Paperclip. As you can see here in the user model, we're just using hasAttachedFile, and we have an attachment called avatar with one single different style called small, which just crops the image to 100 by 100 pixels, as you saw earlier. Now, what we want to do is present a version of the image which is pretty large that the user can select an area that they want to crop out. Now, we could use the original source of the image for this, but that can be any kind of size and dimensions, and that might mess up with the layout of our application. So it's best to create a new style here that we want to present to the user as the croppable version. And so what I'll do is just make a new style called large and make sure that this is, let's say, 500 by 500 or less pixels in size. So this, you might want to change the dimensions for this. So my goal is to make it so that when they go and update or create their avatar image, then when they click submit, it takes them to a new page where they can choose the cropping area for their given graphic. Now, inside of our user's controller, we need to change the create and update behavior so that if a user avatar file is specified, then it redirects them to a cropping page instead of just directly to their user account page. So what we can do is say if params user avatar is blank, then we want to redirect them to their user account. Otherwise, let's just render a different action template. Let's just call it crop. So we want to do this if the user creates an avatar or is just updating their account and specifies a new avatar. And so we want to create a new crop view file. So let's give this a nice little title, crop avatar, and let's display our avatar graphic, our large version here. So we'll do an image tag and say we want our user avatar URL for the large version to display it here. Now in here we'll need to include the necessary JavaScript and stylesheet files for jcrop. Now notice in my application layout file I'm calling yield head in here, and that'll allow me to insert some content into the head tag from my template. And also notice I'm already including jQuery, so all we need to do is include jcrop in our template here. So let's do that. Let's add some content for head, and then add a block here, and that way we can put all of our content into here. And in here, let's include our style sheet for jQuery.jcrop, that's what it's called. And you'll need to download these from the jcrop website if you haven't already, and place them in the appropriate directories. Anyway, we also want to include our JavaScript tag called the same thing, jQuery.jcrop, except I think it ends in .min. And we also want to enable jcrop on our one image here. So let's do this in line, and we'll want to make sure the DOM is loaded. So you do that like this in jQuery. And in here we'll need to refer to our image and call jcrop on it. So I'll just assign an ID here to our graphic called cropbox, and that's kind of the conventional name for these kind of images. Then we can refer to this crop box and just call jcrop on it. Actually, capitalize the J. There we go. So let's give this a try. We'll edit this user and reassign a new avatar to it, which I already did. So now we're presented with our image, and notice we have crosshairs here, and we can select a certain portion of the image. Now, the cropping functionality isn't enabled yet or built into Paperclip right now. We have to add that, but our basic UI is created here. Now we need to add a form onto this page with a crop button, so it might look like this, where we're modifying the user model and we just have a submit tag called crop. Now we need to pass in the values of the crop width, height, and X and Y values into this form as well. So these actually should be attributes on our user model, so we can modify them through JavaScript and submit them through this form. So back inside of our user model, let's add a few attributes here called crop X, crop Y, crop width, and crop height. And now that we have those attributes, we can create a hidden field for each of these in this form. So let's just loop through them all. So for each of these, we'll want to create a hidden field. And we'll just assign the attribute, and we'll assign an ID option onto this as well. So that way, it'll be easier to work with it with JavaScript. So this way, we could just refer to this hidden field value as crop X or crop Y and so on. So now we need to modify our JavaScript so that it updates those values whenever our cropping rectangle changes. And so I'll just paste in some code here that will do this. Notice that jcrop function supports some options, and we can add a callback function here which will be triggered whenever we modify our cropping rectangle. So that way we can assign the appropriate values into those hidden fields. And also notice that I have some other options here. Set select. This will supply an initial cropping rectangle for us, and an aspect ratio. I just set it to 1, which will force the aspect ratio to be equal width and height. So that way it'll be the proper dimensions for our cropping rectangle. You know what? Actually, for now, let's just change this to text fields so that we can just see the way these values are supplied. So now when we go to our cropping page, notice it has an initial selection, and we can move it around, change the size, and it updates the pixel dimensions in the text fields there as well. Now when we click that crop button, it's going to update our user model here. So we need to tell Paperclip to reprocess the attached file if we are cropping it. And so we can do that with this bit of code here. Basically add an after update callback saying we'll reprocess the avatar if we're currently cropping the graphic. And so notice it just checks the crop values here if it's currently cropping. And we have our process avatar method here, which just calls reprocess on our attachment. And that's just a method that Paperclip provides to regenerate the graphic files. But that's not all we have to do. We still need to instruct Paperclip how to handle the cropping based on these values. And to do that, we can create a new custom processor for Paperclip. So let's make a new processor, specify one called cropper, and we still need to make this. Now it's conventional to place your custom Paperclip processors inside the lib directory, create a new folder in here called Paperclip processors. And then create a new file in here. I'm just going to call this cropper. And all the files in here are automatically going to be loaded by Paperclip. So I'll just paste the code in here of what it should look like. So this is what a custom Paperclip processor might look like. It should be inside the Paperclip module. And in this case, we're inheriting from the thumbnail processor, which Paperclip comes with, and that's the default one. So we're basically doing something very similar to just generating a normal thumbnail, but we're adding some modifications for cropping. Now, thumbnail comes with a transformation command, which we're overriding here through inheritance because we want to add our own command options for cropping. This is the command which is basically passed on to the ImageMagick executable. So we're adding our cropping command on here and removing any existing cropping if there is any. And here's what our crop command looks like. We're just basically stringing together the various cropping attributes if the given user should be cropped. So now let's give this a try. Let's just crop the center of my face here, and then click crop. And it almost worked. It cropped our image, but the face isn't centered in here. So why is that? Well, it has to do with the way the cropping and the pixels work. We're judging our pixels based on the resized large style of the image and not the original, but Paperclip and ImageMagick is cropping based off of the original file, which is a somewhat different size than our large style. So we need to compensate between those two. So we know we need to fetch the resolution for the original file. So let's add a method here in our user model called avatar geometry, and this will allow us to get the width and the height of that file. And this just caches the geometry resolution information in a cache here so that it doesn't fetch it every time we call the method. So we can use this method inside of our JavaScript where we are setting the crop values, because we need to change these so that it's the crop values based off of the original image dimensions and not the large style image that we generate. So I'll just paste in some code here. So we basically use that method to determine the ratio difference between those two styles, the original and the large version. And then we can extract that ratio and use it when we generate our crop values inside of this JavaScript. So now let's try cropping this image again. Select just my face here, click crop, and there we go. Now it generated the proper resolution for the small graphic. Now the last thing I want to show you in this episode is how to add a preview image as you're cropping the avatar. So it would be nice if, as we're cropping it, we had a little picture down here that showed us a preview of what the final version would look like at the proper resolution. So going back to our crop view here, I'm going to first change these text field values into just hidden fields so we don't see them. And then I'm going to add a little preview section here. This is what it might look like, where we are redisplaying our large image but placing it into a div which restricts it to a size of 100 by 100 pixels. And so it doesn't allow us to see outside the border of this little div here. And now notice we have the ID of preview here for this little graphic, and so we can use that to actually update the resolution and size of the image in this callback function up here in the JavaScript. So this is what it might look like. We basically take the size of our small graphic, take the coordinates of that, and basically adjust the size of that preview image depending on the crop rectangle coordinates. So now when we go to our cropping page again, you can see we have a preview image down here, which dynamically updates as we adjust our preview, our cropping rectangle here. So we can get it exactly the way we want it to look, and then click crop. And there we go. That's the way it looks. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you found it helpful. I want to give a special thank you to Juan Schwitt, who created the RJ Crop project, which is just a sample Rails application which does something similar to what I showed you here. So I based a lot of my code on that project, so special thanks to that. Oh, one more final note here. If you have problems getting the proper selection of the image to be cropped, it's not matching what you select, then make sure to upgrade to the latest version of ImageMagick, because I had some problems with that earlier, and that seemed to fix it. So it's just a bug in ImageMagick. Make sure you have the latest version. There's only 1 week left to submit your application, so if you're looking for a job and are interested in working with me on a large Ruby on Rails application, send an email to workingwithryan@gmail.com and you'll get an auto response containing more detailed information. And we'll stop taking applications on October 12th, 2009, so be sure to get them in before then.